and welcome to Jesus Christ Prison Ministry and another video Bible study. Our topic, Deuteronomy chapter 16. Observe the month of Abib and celebrate the Passover of the Lord your God, because in the month of Abib he brought you out of Egypt by night. Sacrifice as the Passover to the Lord your God an animal from your flock or herd at the place the Lord will choose as a dwelling for his name. Do not eat it with bread made with yeast, but for 7 days eat unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, because you left Egypt in haste, so that all the days of your life you may remember the time of your departure from Egypt. Let no yeast be found in your possession in all your land for 7 days. Do not let any of the meat you sacrifice on the evening of the first day remain until morning. A couple points in this paragraph. There is sacrifice in serving the Lord. It represents God's sacrifice of his life for us. And so we have to sacrifice. They had to take an animal from their flock. That's a loss. Sacrifice it. Eat it. The other is the yeast. Could represent sin, and they were to make sure that there was no sin in themselves, physically demonstrated by no yeast in their bread and in any of the land during that time. We also need to serve God by sacrificing what is ours. We need to give up for him as he gave for us. You must not sacrifice the Passover in any town the Lord your God gives you, except in the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name. There you must sacrifice the Passover in the evening when the sun goes down on the anniversary of your departure from Egypt. Roast it and eat it at the place the Lord your God will choose. A simple point here I'd like to bring up. There are those who still want to celebrate the Passover, okay, the feast, the 3 yearly feast that God gave the Israelites and only to them. Those feasts could not be celebrated outside of Israel, that's one, and two, outside of the place that God designated in Israel. And there are only 2 places in Israel that I could find where God designated for them to worship and to serve him with those 3 feasts. So unless you're living in Israel, and unless you are in Jerusalem at the temple, you are not allowed to be worshiping God, or celebrating, I should say, those 3 feasts: Passover, Feast of Weeks, and Feast of Trumpets. Then in the morning return to your tents. For 6 days eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day hold an assembly to the Lord your God, and do no work. Count off 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. Then celebrate the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God by giving a free will offering in proportion to the blessings the Lord your God has given you. We need to give more to the Lord than we are. Too many of us are so selfish. Our lives are all about us. We need to recognize the sacrifice God gave us, and we need to follow his example. And rejoice before the Lord your God at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name. You, your sons and daughters, your men servants and maidservants, the Levites in your towns, and the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows living among you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and follow carefully these decrees. Celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and your winepress. Be joyful at your feast, you, your sons and daughters, your men servants and maidservants, and the Levites, the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns. For 7 days celebrate the feast to the Lord your God at the place the Lord will choose. For the Lord your God will bless you in all your harvest and in all the work of your hands, and your joy will be complete. You want your joy complete in the Lord? Sacrifice to the Lord. Give to the Lord, to his work. And what is his work? Well, the New Testament tells us we're to give our tithes and offerings to those who teach the gospel. And that gospel is the gospel that Jesus taught, to be perfect, to stop sinning, and to keep the 10 Commandments to get our eternal life. 3 times a year, all your men must appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. No man should appear before the Lord empty-handed. Each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you. Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town the Lord your God is giving you. And they shall judge the people fairly. I think we're missing a lot of that today. There's not much fairness, is there? The world has become so selfish. Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Follow justice, and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. Oh, how we need to do that. Do not set up any wooden Asherah pole beside the altar you build to the Lord your God, and do not erect a sacred stone, for these the Lord your God hates. Do we have any Asherah poles? Do we have any gods other than him, than Jesus Christ in our lives? Are we worshiping any idols? What's an idol in your life? What can't you live without? We must dedicate our lives to Jesus and him alone. We must worship him and him alone. We must sacrifice for him as he did for us. And then you will be blessed. Thank you for being with me and Jesus Christ for another video Bible study.